Okay, let's find the quadrant where our angle is going to reside. So in each one of these, we're given some information about sine and cosine, I guess, along the way. And our goal is pick out the right quadrant that has these traits going. So how I like doing this is with this nice phrase, all students take calculus. All right, and how we read this is in the first quadrant, everything's positive. All of our trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, their reciprocals, all of them are positive. But when we get into the second quadrant, we're looking at sine is the only thing that's positive, and its reciprocal cosecant will also be positive. So in that second quadrant, we're looking at really just sine. In the third quadrant, begins with a t. That's telling us that tangent is going to be positive, but sine and cosine are going to be negative. And I guess cotangent's also positive. And then in the fourth quadrant, cosine is going to be positive, but everything else, sine and tangent, are going to be negative. Also, I guess secant is going to be positive there. But all students take calculus. This really helps out as far as picking out which quadrant we need to be looking at. So let's kind of go through these one at a time and sort of label these. One problem. All right. So we have sine of t is less than 0. That means it's negative. So where's sine going to be negative? Well, sine is positive in the first quadrant, positive in the second quadrant. That kind of limits us to the third and fourth. All right. So sine is positive in the third, or sorry, negative in the third and negative in the fourth. Next, we have cosine is going to be less than 0. That means cosine is going to be negative. Well, cosine's positive in the first. It's negative in the second because only sine is positive in the second. So cosine is going to be negative in the second. And then cosine is going to be negative in the third quadrant. All right, only tangent's positive, cosine's back to positive in the fourth quadrant. So as you go through these, you're just kind of looking and saying, all right, well, this was okay to either be third and fourth. This was either second and or third. So what do they have in common? This has to be the third quadrant. All right, let's take a look at this next one. We have sine is positive, cosine's positive. All right, so for them both to be positive, I'll kind of list out the quadrants here. But sine's going to be positive in the first and the second quadrant. All right, all students take calculus. Everything's positive here. Sine's positive in the second quadrant. All right, cosine's positive in the first quadrant and in the fourth quadrant. So what do they have in common? Well, they have the first quadrant in common. So that's going to be first quadrant is our answer. All right, next, sine's positive. Sine's greater than 0. Again, that's going to be first and second quadrants. But now we have cosine is less than 0. Cosine is going to be negative. Well, positive here in the first quadrant, negative in the second quadrant, and negative in the third quadrant. Back to positive in the fourth quadrant. Okay, so what do they have in common? Well, they have the second quadrant in common. So we'd answer second quadrant. All right, one last one here. We want to know when is sine less than 0. So sine's negative. Well, sine's positive in the first quadrant, positive in the second quadrant. So we're either looking at the third or the fourth quadrant. And then finally, cosine has to be greater than 0. That means cosine is positive. Well, it could be first quadrant, everything's positive, or cosine is going to be the fourth quadrant. What do they have in common? The fourth quadrant. That's how we answer this. That one's going to be fourth quadrant only. All right, hope this helps out as you're trying to pick out the proper quadrant based on positive or negative for sine and cosine. Good luck.